So today we got a mystery. This is a Dr. Chipper. Dr. Chipper that should be good for up to 4 inches. Should be able to chop 4-inch branches, but they say try to keep it at 3. It's got a discharge chute up top here. It's towable. And yeah, looks like a more deluxe version. Powered by a 18 horsepower V-twin Vanguard with a 9-gallon fuel tank on top. And so it's got electric start. It's got a battery down here. And the customer says that it doesn't start. So my first look of stuff like this is, well, it doesn't have spark. It's a fairly new machine. It hasn't hardly done anything. Maybe it's got 20 hours or so. And there's a safety switch here that if you flip this chute out of the way, that where the hammer beater blades are exposed, there's a safety switch here that opens and then it kills the spark, so you can't run it without the safety switch in place. Well, it was real chintzy. It didn't matter where I held the switch open or closed, I didn't have spark in the engine. So I cut it off. I just cut the switch off. It was junk. It was like just thin plasticky and coated metal, spring loaded. So I cut it off, and as soon as I cut it off, the two wires separated themselves. So there's the ground wire, and then there's another wire that comes from the engine wiring that goes in this. There's only a single wire in this, and then there's a ground wire here. So it's a 2-wire switch. As soon as I cut it off, the engine has spark and would like to start, but it's got spark as soon as I cut it off. So now we'll order a new switch, but in the meantime I'm just gonna tie up the wires like this so that he can use it till the new switch gets here. So now it's got spark, but it's not getting fuel. And at least it's not starting. It looks like it's, if I squirt fuel in the top here, if I squirt in fuel with my turkey baster into the top of the intake on the carburetor, it runs for a few seconds. So I know it's not getting fuel. So then I'm like, okay, let's keep going with our diagnostics. So it wants to run if it has fuel. So there's like 1.5 gallons of gas in this thing. It's turned on. There's a shut off right here. There's a on in and off. So the shut off is on. It's not getting fueled, even though there's quite a bit in the tank. I put something over this because it was sitting outside overnight, so I didn't want any junk getting in the intake. So if I squirted gas into this intake on top of the carb, it was running for like 5-10 seconds. So now I'm like, well, let's rule out if it's the tank or the carb, even though there's quite a bit of gas in the tank. We want to rule out what the problem is, whether it's the tank. Ooh. So I took the tank off. And held it over a container, and I'm not getting fuel to come out of the tank. Out of that tank. That's a 9-gallon tank, supposedly. So I hooked up my trusty test tank here. This is off of an old earthquake generator, just a tiny tank. Hooked that up to their line here, and it runs like a dream. It ran for several minutes. It sucked in like a cup worth of gas and ran like a top. So I know problem is probably with this. So I kept going. Now that we know that there's probably nothing wrong with the engine, gas-wise, why is it not getting gas? So we looked at various aspects of this. There's quite a bit of gas in this. Yeah, there's no gas coming out. So under the tank, I don't know if you've ever seen one of these. And I don't want to stand this up to where there will be gas coming out of the cap, because it's a vented cap. So I'm going to stand it like this. Make sure. Oh, yeah. No worries. There's no gas coming out. So I stood it up like this. And I took the line off here, blew through this. This is open. I still get no gas coming from here. So this, I don't know if you know this, but this is a fuel filter. And so I took it off here. If I take the fuel filter out of this big 1/2-inch line, it flows just fine. So this, so I blew backwards through this with brake cleaner, so I've just tried to get it going. Nothing. I mean, it looks like there's air going through it, but there's no fuel coming through it. There's lots coming out this big line out of the tank. So after monkeying with it for a few minutes, not getting any flow from it, I went and found a local guy who had this fuel filter. This is a genuine Briggs part. I think that's the only people that are using it is Briggs. These have been on generators and other units that use the 9-gallon tank. So this is an odd one. So it's got like a 3/8 or 1/2-inch outlet and a 1/4-inch. They're all facing the same way. And then the part number for this, I actually saw this with another part number. I'm not sure if it was the same, but the part number is 808116, S as in Sam. It's the number for this. So if you have like 18-horse Vanguard with a 9-gallon tank, that is the fuel filter for it. And then it needs a new air filter. The air filter is pretty dirty. The air filter on that would be a 393957S as in Sam. The part number for that air cleaner, I'll show you the original one. So my local dealer had all this stuff on hand. And then you need a pre-filter for that air filter. That is 271794S as in Sam. So you need the pre-filter. And I'll show you why I'm replacing I'll show you why I'm thinking this. So this is a wood chipper. So this runs in dirty conditions. This filter is already starting to fall apart in places. It's really old. It's probably the original one. So it's just a canister air filter. And the number directly on this Briggs filter is 393957. I don't know why they added the S to the new part numbers. But that is a genuine Briggs. So yeah, it needs to be replaced. I'm not even going to clean any of it. So that's what we're going to do, and then we'll test it. So I'm not going to film doing the whole thing. It's pretty simple stuff. But I can film it firing it up afterwards. So that's that, and we'll see if we're successful. So this is what it looks like underneath that tank. You got like a half inch fuel line coming out of the bottom of the tank. Goes into this canister filter. I put today's date on it. But that's the filter. And then from the filter, the gas goes to a 1/4-inch fuel line into this red shutoff. And so I just let like a half a container gas through that, and it just poured out like it's supposed to. So I'm 100% confident that's what was wrong. The other filter wouldn't let any fuel pass through it anymore. So let me go ahead and get the tank on the machine, and we'll fire it up and just make sure everything works before we put the air cleaner on top. So we got the line connected from the tank to the carburetor, and there is their choke. You look here, there's a shutoff. That shutoff that reaches in and turns that red valve. See? Now it's on, so that's open. And then the choke is over on this side. So we're going to go ahead and fire it up. There's quite a bit of gas in it. And we want to see if it's going to start after we replace the fuel filter and before we put the air cleaner up on top. We're going to make sure it runs before we finish it up. The tank is also not bolted down yet, but before we do that, we want to make sure that it runs and that we diagnosed it correctly with the fuel situation. It was not getting fuel through the original fuel filter. Let's go ahead and make sure the throttle's on. Yep, that's what it was. It was that filter. It was not letting fuel through there. A new fuel filter did it.